Hi guys, it's Miss Weems. We got to do some notes today. So here's a recording of me going over types of disorders. Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about, first type of disorder we're going to talk about, I should say, is anxiety disorders. So anxiety is a general state of dread and uneasiness that occurs in response to a vague or imagined fear. So these people are very nervous, they have difficulty relaxing, they have concerns about losing control, and anxiety disorders are the most common psychological disorder. Okay, so here's a couple types. You got phobias, which is the phobic disorder up here. So that is a persistent or irrational fear of an object or situation. So in order to be a phobia, the fear has to lead to avoidance behavior, okay, that impacts your ability to live. So I don't like spiders, but I'm not afraid to go outside because I might interact with a spider. If I was afraid to go outside because I might see a spider, and that impacts my ability to live my life, and that is a phobia. Not enjoying spiders, hoping I don't have to deal with it, is not a phobia because it doesn't impact my ability to function in the world. Okay. So panic disorders would be people who have panic attacks. Okay, so they feel a lot like a heart attack, and it's this really short period of intense fear that will actually give you chest pains, make it difficulty to breathe, and a lot of those symptoms of a heart attack. And then you have obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay, so OCD is when people have obsessive behaviors that occur over and over again. So I know people say, well, like, I have to have things neat, and that's OCD. No, it's not. OCD is like having to flick the light switch on and off 6 times before you can go into a room. Or the inability you have to wash your hands 5 times. There's usually a very specific number, and they can't function without it. David Beckham has OCD, and he has to have 3 of each item in his refrigerator. And he can't have certain items in the same refrigerator, to the point where he bought a second refrigerator and he has to have 3 of every single item in that fridge. That's OCD. Not being neat and organized. That's not OCD. Hoarding is actually a form of OCD, so people who cannot stand the fact they have to keep all this stuff and they have to have it, and that's OCD. Okay, so what are some possible causes of it? Phobias might be conditioned in childhood. If you got bit by a dog once and now you have this deep, over intense fear of dogs, that could be it. And people tend to learn to avoid situations that cause their anxiety, which could deal with the impact, avoidance behavior that you see in some disorders. Some things might be genetic. Anxiety disorders, panic attacks could be genetic. People who are generalized and nervous could have an anxiety disorder. And it's usually a combination of factors. All right, let's talk about dissociative disorders. So disassociation is when there's a separation of aspects of your thought process or your personality from your active thought. So dissociative amnesia is a really sudden loss of memory, usually followed by a traumatic event. So we're not talking about like you hit your head and now you can't remember who you are. We're talking about people who have blocked out aspects of their life because something traumatic happened and they don't want to deal with it. So maybe and again, this isn't, I don't want to talk about it. This is, you cannot remember. So people might, if they were in a horrific car accident, they may not be able to remember anything about the car accident because their body has just shut it down. And again, no biological reason. So they didn't hit their head. They might have broke their arm, but there should be no physical reason for the memory loss. Okay. Dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorder, is the existence of 2 or more personalities within a single person. Okay. And the personalities may or may not be aware of each other. So a lot of psychologists don't believe that dissociative identity disorder is real, but it's this belief that there might be, there's Miss Weems, and then there's Becky, and Becky is 5 years old, and she likes to play with Barbies, and I don't realize that, I may or may not be aware that Becky exists, and sometimes I'm Miss Weems and sometimes I'm Becky. Okay, that would be an example of dissociative identity disorder. No, I do not have dissociative identity disorder. Okay, so what causes it? People might have the amnesia because they don't want to deal with unacceptable urges, like maybe they don't want to be angry with their parents, so they've blocked out all the memories of abuse or bad things their parents did because they don't want to deal with it. For dissociative identity, a person might create other personalities to express urges that they're not comfortable expressing themselves, or they might do it to separate themselves from some kind of trauma or pain that they've experienced. Okay, so somatoform disorders. So somatization is when people express mental anguish physically. So rather than have the mental symptoms of the psychological symptoms of the disorder, they express it physically. Like they might have depression, but rather than feel their depression, they have paralysis. But there's no medical reason for them to have paralysis. So that would be a conversion disorder, when they experience the loss of physical functioning in a major part of their body and there's no medical reason for it. Okay. And then the hypochondriac. So hypochondriasis, and someone who has it is called a hypochondriac, is a person who constantly diagnoses themselves with diseases. So the WebMD is very bad for these people because they might look up a symptom and self-diagnose that they have something very, very serious. So, they might look up a sniffly nose and ignore the fact that they get the sniffly nose every spring and it's probably allergies, and try to self-diagnose themselves with COVID or some other very serious disease. Okay. So here are some possible causes of it. So again, instead of expressing the emotion for whatever reason, the person expresses it physically. And they might just be more comfortable having a medical issue than a psychological issue. Okay, don't worry about this. So your assignment is going to be, I'm going to post a link to Flipgrid, and I'm going to give you 2 YouTube videos, and I want you to diagnose, using these notes, what disorder you think the person has, and then back up your diagnosis. You got to use some facts to back yourself up. Okay? I hope you guys are staying safe. I miss you. Bye, guys.